I didn't quite stick to my last plan, which is doing a clip on Sunday and perhaps Wednesdays. Time has flown by, but yeah. Hi, this is Anna from Post Me a Book. So it's been a while, but today I thought I'll talk about the last few books either that I've read or that I'm in the middle of reading. Actually, I've read one book and I'm in the middle of reading two. And the one book that I've read is the Steve Biko book, I Write What I Like. Unfortunately, I've been wandering about with this book so much, I don't actually know where I've put it. It's somewhere in the house, but the physical copy, I'm not sure where I've put it. So I will just put a cover up there so that you see what it looks like. An image, I mean. The Steve Biko book was very, very good. I love the way he writes, and I love the message that he was actually promoting. He had a very strong, profound way of getting it across. So when I picked up this book, I had an idea what it was about anyway, because this is not a new book, and this was during the time of apartheid. Steve Biko was a South African black activist who opposed the regime, the apartheid regime, and he spoke against it during his time, and he died because of his speeches and his talking and his writings, because of his opposition and trying to awaken the black people of South Africa, the blacks and the colored people of South Africa. So I Write What I Like is a collection of Steve Biko's writings, and it explores the politics of oppression, liberation, and identity, and how these three things intersect. Steve Biko, as I said, was a key figure in the South African anti-apartheid movement, and he had a philosophy, the philosophy of black consciousness. And this, within this text, he tries to ignite or reignite black identity, black culture, to awaken the voice of the oppressed so that they can reclaim themselves, to make, and also to help them be self-aware of this, of where they're at just now or during that time. Help them to realize that their own story has been changed, their own narrative has been changed, it's been silenced, and they've taken on upon them the narrative of the colonialists. So the philosophy of black consciousness delves into, I guess you could say, delves into race consciousness and human condition, because it takes up a lot of how the oppressed people in South Africa are treated, how they do not have equal rights, despite things being said that, well, let's just say how they do not have equal rights, how they are the ones who live far away, and despite being very poor, they're the ones who have to find the transport to get into town, albeit it's their blood and sweat that's holding out South Africa. They're the ones who don't have money for Medicare, they don't have money for transport, they don't have time when they come home because the distance is so far, so by the time they come home, they just eat, just sleep, and then repeat. So he points this out when he was in court, and he was in court several times, and this was one of the writings in the books where he pointed out to the judge with very interesting replies. So it's a book worth reading, but it's a book that's, I guess it's sad the way people think, and it's sad because this thing still goes on. But anyway, let me focus on the book. Steve Biko, even in all this, he's aware that the process of liberation, even though he's aware of trying to reignite or awaken the oppressed so that they find their own identity, he knows that this process is not an easy one, because it requires understanding of oneself. It requires this understanding that the narrative has been changed. It requires the understanding that there is this thing about divide and conquer, where you can sometimes see that because people are poor, they don't always have the chance to think about the neighbor, since it's each one for himself. So he tries to remind them of how it was before the colonialists came. People did help each other. It wasn't strange that you asked someone to come and help you on your own farm, or you asked your neighbor to come and help you. And it wasn't strange that it was vice versa. And the interesting thing about this, when I read this in the book, I remembered the book When Rain Clouds Gather, where, now I forget the author's name, Betty, I'll have to put it up, I forget her name. But anyway, where she writes that the protagonist in that book, he moves over to Botswana from South Africa because, as he says, he'd rather die than be a slave to colonial masters and be treated that way. And when he came to the village that he came to, he found that nobody there ever locked their doors. And he was very surprised by this. And he asked his mentor, the man that he happened upon when he was there, who then became his mentor, why was this? And the man, his mentor, was very surprised because he said, well, theft does not exist in our village. Why would we lock our doors? And that was very alien to the protagonist. So I think it is in this book, you also see that this is how it was in South Africa before the colonialists came. And he also points out, Steve Biko, he also points out that the narrative changed when missionaries came to South Africa. And then they're teaching the children, and they start teaching the children that what their parents, how the parents, or the parents' beliefs, how that is wrong. And certain things that parents do, which I accept are not always right, but in this case, some things that are also right are changed by the missionaries, which then changes how the children see their parents. So this then becomes a disrespect for your elders, which didn't exist before. It was respect for your elders was a very important thing, and still is in Africa. So you can still see these differences. There's both good and bad in all this, but you can definitely see the differences about, well, I can, in these cultural differences. But again, let me focus on the book. So coming back to Steve Biko, he realizes that the process of liberation is not a straight line, trying to get people to realize just where they at, just where they were, trying to awaken them from all this that has been buried deep, and of course continues to be buried deep so long as the colonialists are there and so long as people are not fighting to break their chains, is something that it's a message that his book brings out. So what Biko means is that that this path requires that the individual, the oppressed, realizes and recognizes the historical forces that shaped Black identity. And what he means is that this journey is not just external, but it's an internal, an internal reckoning of self-worth and identity. So again, his message is very profound. And he also talks about how the systematic injustices the systematic injustices of apartheid fragment the self, not just on a social, political level, but also on the psychological level. And this again we see, albeit I'm going to take up Sorrowland, but Sorrowland is not a documentary, and it's not quite necessarily based in the same way as Rain Clouds Gather and Steve Biko's book, because both of these are written by people who were born and who lived within the time of apartheid. But I'll just say in Sorrowland, she does take on how the protagonist in that book, because of the way where they lived, where she lived before she escaped, how it had changed her own way of thinking, and she didn't really know who she was without her community, that community in a close community. So this we see that Steve Biko is trying to make people realize that that because of the change in their narrative, because of all that has been brought down upon them, and because they do not have time to even stop and think what's happening to them. They're they're no longer whole, I guess is what he's saying. This now the fragmented self, they're no longer whole. And Steve Biko tries in his writings to show this. And his writings, let's say the book, I Write What I Like, is a form of resistance. It is his form of oppressing or throwing back or rejecting what has been thrown to him by the colonialists. Because by writing what he likes, he's showing them he's changing, he's reclaiming his own narrative. He's not writing what they like, he's writing what he likes. And he's reclaiming his own narrative. So that for him was a form of resistance. And although when he was in court at some point, when I read somewhere towards the end of the book, I think it was a chapter called Black Consciousness, the judge was, or rather not just the judge, but it seems they were trying to entrap him into saying that his writings or his speeches were going to incite violence, and was this his plan? But he also at some point had said that what he's trying to do is to make people aware, make the black person aware, make the oppressed aware of what is happening to them. And when the judge, someone asked him, it was either the judge or the lawyer, they talked about an incident where a black man was pushed into a train by a white man, and the black man, he was just trying to stop this white person from dissing a black woman, and was then pushed into a train and died. And Biko points out to the judge, this is just one incident that shows that could be used to incite violence. Although he doesn't quite use those words, but he's just trying to point out to the judge that this is just one case where you could see, if you really wanted to find a reason for black people to stand up and fight, this is just one incident, but there are many more. However, as he put it, I am not trying to incite violence, but if you look at cases like this, you can find an explanation on why it would happen. And he also says, he writes in his book that he and other black people don't want to turn the tables. They don't want to be the masters. They don't want to be the oppressors because they've lived through it. There's no reason why they would want to impose it on someone else. What he wants is to make South Africa a much better place. And he puts it in one of his chapters at the end, that in this way we can improve as ourselves as human beings by being better people. And I think that was it, at the end of it, it's a very encouraging message to find when you find people who have suffered so much that they still have this belief that even though we're being imposed upon, even if we're being beaten, mistreated, whatever is done, we don't want to do this to you. We want peace. We want the world to be a better place. We want everyone to be treated as human beings. And I love that he gives this message. And I think this was also something I pointed out when I read, I have such a terrible memory. Anyway, I meant the book by Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And I think I pointed out when I did the clip of that book, that throughout the book, she never actually showed any hatred for the people who oppressed her, despite what she lived through. And I don't know whether it's a thing of people who are not living it that one feels, but this can't be true, because obviously there are people who do feel this hatred, or show this hatred, or rather show opposition to what's happening to them in a more violent way. But Maya Angelou, she didn't show it at all. And this, I think, is also Steve Biko's writings, that he didn't show this at all. He rather that we be better people, better human beings, and we help each other. So that's that book, which I have now finished and put somewhere else. And now for the other books. Let's see. M.R. James's book. Let's see if you can see it. Collected Ghost Stories. I started reading this one actually during Halloween because I was looking for a theme. This is the first time I've read a book that's connected to any theme whatsoever. But just because it was Halloween and just because it was taking me so long to finish books, I wanted just to pick up something different. So Halloween came, and I popped into my head that why not do something in a Halloween theme? And I knew where this book was on our house library, but I'd never ever actually read it. Never ever wondered what it was about really, apart from the fact that it's ghost stories. I have no idea why I bought this book. Never heard of M.R. James till the time I picked it up during Halloween. It's got a lot of ghost stories, and he's a very good writer. I mean, I have to give him that. He is very good at engaging the reader straight away, and he's very good also. It's not one of these horror books. It's more the chilling, you know something's about to happen stories, and you can feel it, the suspense that he actually puts in his stories is there. And you know, you kind of want to keep on reading to find out what's happening. It's none of this boom, wide awake that something's happened, but you just know it's like going down, just like you see in this picture, the street of someone, this road, and someone's going down that road, and you know, the case where you say, I don't know why they're walking down a road in the rain in the middle of the dark, that kind of thing. And you just know something's going to happen. That's what his stories are like. And I have to say that he actually engages the reader straight away. He has that a very good way of doing it in the first pages actually, and it's not because he's talking about, he's making it like a ghost story. It's just that his first few sentences are very good. There was one story that I read. Let's see. Perhaps it was the first story that I read, which was the ash tree. He starts off by saying, everyone who has travelled over East England knows the smaller country houses with which it is studded, the rather dark little buildings, usually in the Italian style, surrounded with parks of some 80 to 100 acres. For me, they have always had a very strong attraction, with the grey paling of split oak and noble trees, and meres with their reed beds and the line of distant woods. And I have to say, even reading this one, he has such a, for me, he had such an art of just forming the picture in my head of what he was painting in these few beginning sentences. I actually truly enjoyed just the few stories I've read. I haven't read it at all. That's to say, I haven't read it completely. But he was very good about that. And I'd have to also say that he has this knack of what, although I've referred to it a little bit, knack of what Roald Dahl so about, sorry, combining combining languages here, said about the difference between short stories and longer stories, that's to say, let's say novels, where he says that in short stories you do not have the time to kind of build up slowly to the story. You have to, it has to happen within the first few sentences. Because it's a short story, you have to really you have to develop. The story has to be, the short story as it is, it has to develop quickly. You don't have time for, as I said, you don't have time for slow burn. You don't have time for, or rather, you have a limited amount of language to use. So it has to be a quick development of the story, has to start quickly, it has to finish quickly, and everything has to be in that little space in between. So everything has to be developed in that. So what Roald Dahl is saying is that sometimes short stories are a little bit harder to create than a novel. I'm no author, so in that case, I really cannot say too much, but I do understand what it means having read this, read the M.R. James short stories. He was actually said to be a very renowned, or one of the best even, ghost story writers during his time, born in 1862 and died in 1932, I think it was. So, a while back. And his ghost stories are, let me see, how would I describe them? He's got some interesting, and he's even got humor in his stories, I have to say. So that's another thing I liked about his stories. his ghost stories, are, I guess they bring chill instead of something else, and he leaves a lot to the imagination of the reader. So he doesn't give too much away, which I guess is also good because, as I said, you have a limited space of language. So that's a very good way of doing it. What else can I say about this book? What else can I say about this book? Well, I guess not very much more because I haven't read it all. I've read about 4 stories, but I will read more because they are also very easy to read. I probably won't wait until next Halloween, but who knows? Now the theme is gone. I have to get back to the books that I'm reading. But yeah, absolutely would recommend this if you're into ghost stories that are not over the top, I guess. So that is M.R. James's Collected Ghost Stories. And now I have to get to, let's see, Empire of Silence. Yes, I am now reading this book finally. And it's actually going quite well. I haven't got so far, but I've got to chapter 24. It's very easy to read this book. It's got lovely print, I have to say. The print is a real positive. It makes it easy on the eyes. I guess it's that. It seems that the book, because in the beginning I thought this book was very thick and it's going to take me years to read. But I can now say it won't take me years to read. It might take me a little while, but I think it will take me a much shorter time than I thought it would take me. And it's a very good book, very good read so far. He's very good at describing, I guess, so that his narrative is very not descriptive. I think that's wrong. What I'm trying to say, his storyline, I feel, is very good. I'm not. Perhaps you'd have to be into science fiction. I guess you would have to be into science fiction because I guess that's not everybody's read. And I do like science fiction, although it's been a very long time since I read it. But he's very good at keeping you into the story without it being too much. And I guess here I'd perhaps compare to There by Tommy Orange, albeit a completely different book. But there it had so many characters that I kind of got a bit confused, although I could follow through by looking back because the chapters were always named after the characters. In this storyline, you follow Hadrian, who is the protagonist, and he's the son of Lord Arthur, I think he's called. I can't quite remember, but anyway, and he's not very old. Well, they can be old, these people, supposedly, because they have a regenerative something that keeps them going for years. But anyway, his father is supposed to be the lord of a lot of land, and he's the one who sort of keeps the peace. And he's a kind of ruthless leader, his father. And Hadrian thought that he was going to follow in the footsteps of his father, but it seems that this is not the case. The other thing about Hadrian is that although his father is ruthless and he feels that to lord over everybody else, he has to keep them in order by, well, if it means killing them, then so be it. Otherwise, how are you going to let them know that you're Lord? But Hadrian does not believe in this way of living. He's a philosopher or an intellectual, and his teacher is also an intellectual. So he tries to find a way to live. Well, in the beginning, he thought he was going to be Lord, take after his father, but that's not the case. Not to give away too much, I'll just say that one. So he tries to find a way to live the life that he wants rather than be a ruthless leader. And that's really as far as I've got, is that in these first 24 pages, is that he's just trying to find a way to live the way he prefers, which he doesn't really want his dad. Well, he did let his dad to know, and his dad said, no, that is not gonna happen. No son of mine is going to be an intellectual. You go out, be ruthless, keep people under your foot, kind of thing. So that is pretty much where I'm at. I can't really say that much, otherwise I'll just be giving away the book. However, as I was saying, very good book. So I guess you can describe that Hadrian's life as an exploration of his personal autonomy, his personal freedom, because he wants to be able to live the way he wants, but he's bound by his father, who tells him, you must live this way. Power and honor is a way forwards. These constraints he doesn't like, but because he's an aristocrat and a noble, he's also, it's not so easy for him also to just kind of do what he wants, even though he feels that he should be able to, because obviously the plebs, as they call them, the plebeians, are not so happy to see an aristocrat trying to become one of them. So, not so easy for Hadrian, but we'll see what happens to him in the rest of the book. As I said, I've not got very far at all. I've only got about, not even a third of the way, a little over a quarter of the way. So there's still much more of the story to go, but as I said, very good book. And he was Christopher Riccio, new author to me. I can't really compare this to other books because I haven't read many of these epic books like Frank Herbert's Dune, and this book is compared to one of those, for example. I know that Dune is somewhere up there, amongst somewhere in all this. We have Dune. Who knows? Perhaps I'll read it. I can't. I'm not sure. Dune looked like a a very, very long book, but perhaps I'll get a science fiction streak and delve deep and read Dune one of these good days. But anyway, until next time, this is the book I'm currently reading, Ghost Stories by M.R. James. Because they're so easy, I should read them on and off. But so we'll say those two books. However, I did really want to get onto some other books, so perhaps I will actually just get through this. Oh, that sounded so wrong. Just get through this. It's a good book. I will concentrate on this, is what I meant to say. But it's been a while since I did a clip, so this has been fun. So until next time, thank you for watching to the end. Like and subscribe. If anyone has any comments, I'm dreadfully bad at comments, so I will be a lot better at actually replying to comments. I have to navigate. Some of them disappear, I've realized. I see that a comment has been left and then it's not there. I kept meaning to reply. But also not very good, but gonna get better. So until next time, bye-bye.